Hi. So yes, just to explain, my name's Susan Coftree. I work on the Europe and Central Asia program at Article 19, which is an international organization that protects freedom of expression and right to information. I had the good fortune to meet Tatiana, I think, around 3 years ago now, and a great admirer of all the work that she and her colleagues do at Team 29, and it's great that we can collaborate together. We also, work on access to information at a global level, but in many countries around the world. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk briefly about my organization, what we do on Russia and other countries, and just given the subject of Tatiana's presentation, talk specifically on a couple of points regarding freedom of information in the UK. Just briefly, Article 19 has been running for about 30 years now, and we take our name from the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted in 1948 after the experience of World War II by the United Nations. And so it's very much taken that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. While that right is not absolute, it can only be restricted according to international law under very narrow circumstances. And so we work as at an international level using that framework to try and promote and protect freedom of expression and right to information as it intersects with many other issues and discussions, and that's ever evolving, particularly these days when you look at the online sphere as well. So if you can. We work, we have several regional offices all over the world. We've got 3 now in the African continent. We have a couple in Latin America, in the US. But even though we don't always have a physical presence on the ground, we do also work in collaboration with local organizations, local partners, lawyers, journalists, and those who are working to improve the rights to freedom of expression, or those who find their rights violated in some way or another. Because we are an international organization and we come from Article 19, we use that as our starting point. We have a team of lawyers who analyze laws for whether or not they are promoting or protecting freedom of expression and right to information. But we also do some practical work on the ground. We train journalists on freedom of expression, for example, domestically. We also do protection trainings and other kinds of trainings that can help keep people safe in the environments in which they work. We also interact with international and regional bodies. One of those is the Council of Europe, which was also established shortly after World War II in 1949. And it is a member state, has, I think, 47 members, including Russia. And it is a human rights-focused institution. It has many different parts of it, including the European Court of Human Rights. And Article 19 is one of several founding partners of a platform to promote and protect journalists, which you can see here on the screen. We monitor the situation with our partners of attacks or violence against journalists that's happening on the ground. We update these alerts to this platform. We verify them and update them. And they're shared with all 47 member states. And they're used internally in informing their advocacy or their decision-making. And so this is one sort of area that we do. Another area is around legal expertise. So in terms of cases where there have been violations against journalists or media outlets, they often take those cases once the domestic remedies are exhausted to the European Court of Human Rights. And we have the opportunity to provide expertise in that. One case that we just submitted an amicus brief last week was on the 3 media that were blocked in Russia a few years ago, Granny, and Kasparov's website. So that case is just about to be heard by the European Court of Human Rights. So maybe, coming back to the theme of today's topic, freedom of information. I noticed that the quote at the top of today's agenda in the that you have in your guides was from George Orwell, where he said, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear, which, I mean, encapsulates it very well. But I thought, if anything, you could also add, if it means anything, it means the right to know what people in power do not want you to hear, and exploring why that is. And I think that gets to the crux of what freedom of information is about and why it's important. It's a tool for holding governments to account and finding out what those in power are doing. Over the past 15 years, there's been huge progress in this area in terms of law and in practice. Nearly 120 countries worldwide, including Russia, has Freedom of Information Act. Actually, Russia's being more recent, and thanks to the great efforts of Ivan Pavlov and other colleagues, is actually a very good piece of legislation, even better than the UK. So high commendations to you. And what can start as an individual request for information by a journalist on a particular issue that's happening to them or in their area can actually be a way into a much bigger story about something that's happening not just in their region, but maybe across nationally, about abuse of power or misallocation of funds. So on that note, I just wanted to bring in an example from here in the UK. The Freedom of Information Act was adopted here in 2000, so 18 years ago. But I would say for most people here, it didn't really sink into kind of wider public consciousness until 2009, when the Daily Telegraph, one of our national newspapers, published a story about MPs' expenses and what they had been claiming in members of parliament, what they had been claiming as expenses in previous years. And some of these were quite shocking, and it showed members, our representatives, to be what has been described as greedy and unjustifiable use of the public taxpayers' expense. This was very much came from a series of access to information requests, and it resulted in several members of parliament going to prison, and many others having to resign or pay back money to the state. So perhaps unsurprisingly, it has been controversial and continues to need to be protected here in the UK. Tony Blair, our former Prime Minister, was a huge advocate for freedom of expression and rights to information 20-odd years ago. And in 1996, before he was Prime Minister, he said that if a government is genuine about wanting a partnership with the people who it's governing, then the act of government itself must be seen in some sense as a shared responsibility, and the government has to empower the people and give them a say in how that politics is conducted. The following year, he became Prime Minister, and in 2000, the Freedom of Expression Act was adopted, the Freedom of Information Act was adopted. In 2010, in his memoirs, he'd clearly had a bit of a change of heart. And bear in mind, this is 1 year after the expenses scandal. He wrote, "You idiot," this is him talking about himself, "you naive, foolish, irresponsible nincompoop," a very great British word. "There is really no description of the stupidity, no how matter vivid that is adequate. I quake at the imbecility of it." So clearly even he realized once you give people the power to know what's going on, they can wield it. So one of his big complaints was the fact that he didn't feel that freedom of information was being used enough by the people but by journalists. But I think we can understand that journalists are the watchdog for the people, so we should continue to campaign and to utilize it. So that's it. Thank you very much.